Hello everyone. Today's topic is India's GDP evolution. I discuss India's GDP growth with various GDP related topics, and those topics are: what is GDP, how to calculate GDP, what is PPP, India's GDP growth 2022, India's fiscal deficit, India's Forex reserve, and finally, future of India's economy. Let's start. What is gross domestic product? Gross domestic product GDP is the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's border in a specific time period. मीन्स एक देश के अंदर एक स्पेसिफिक टाइम पीरियड जिसे हम एक फिजिकल ईयर कह सकते हैं, उसके अंदर जितने भी गुड्स और सर्विसेज का प्रोडक्शन हुआ है उन सब का मॉनेटरी और मार्केट वैल्यू का उस देश का ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट यानी कि जीडीपी कहा जाता है। रियल जीडीपी इज एन इन्फ्लेशन एडजस्टेड मेजर that reflects the quantity of goods and services produced by an economy in a given year. Since GDP is based on monetary value of goods and services, real GDP is subject to inflation. GDP provides an economic snapshot of a country used to estimate size of economy and growth rate. जीडीपी किसी देश का इकोनॉमी का साइज एस्टिमेट करता है और उस देश का इकोनॉमी का ग्रोथ रेट दर्शाता है। जीडीपी कैन बी कैलकुलेटेड इन 3 वेज। जीडीपी 3 तरीके से कैलकुलेट किया जा सकता है, यूजिंग एक्सपेंडिचर, प्रोडक्शन और इनकम। GDP is a key tool to guide policymakers, investors, and businesses in strategic decision making. How to calculate GDP? GDP can be determined via 3 primary methods. All 3 methods should yield the same figures when correctly calculated. GDP 3 तरीके से कैलकुलेट किया जा सकता है। ये 3 मेथड सेम फिगर दिखाते हैं। These 3 approaches are named as expenditure approach, output approach, and the income approach. The expenditure approach, also known as spending approach, calculate spending by the different group that participate in the economy. इकोनॉमी में जो लोग पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं उन लोगों का पूरा स्पेंडिंग एक्सपेंडिचर अप्रोच में दिखाया जाता है। इसका फॉर्मूला है जीडीपी इक्वल टू सी प्लस जी प्लस आई प्लस एन एक्स। सी इक्वल टू कंजम्पशन, जी इक्वल टू गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग, I equal to investment, and finally NX equal to net exports. What is PPP? Economists look at purchasing power parity (PPP) to see how one country's GDP measures up in international dollar, using a method that adjusts for differences in local prices and cost of living to make cross-country comparison of real output, real income, and living standards. इकोनॉमिस्ट परचेसिंग पावर पैरिटी के ज़रिए से किसी देश का जीडीपी को इंटरनेशनल डॉलर में मेज़र करते हैं और डिफरेंस देखते हैं लोकल प्राइसेस एंड क्रॉस कंट्री कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग को। जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट। द जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट compares the year-over-year change in country's economic output to measure how fast an economy is growing. GDP growth is thought to be closely connected to key policy targets such as inflation and unemployment rate. If GDP growth rate accelerates, अगर GDP का growth rate बढ़ता है, it may be a signal that the economy is overheating and the central bank may seek to raise interest rate. तो सेंट्रल बैंक उनकी इंटरेस्ट रेट्स बढ़ा देगी। Conversely, GDP growth is as a signal that the rate should be lowered and the stimulus may be necessary. On March 31st, 2022, Government of India Tuesday revised its GDP growth the estimate for 2021 to 22 8.7%, lower than its earlier estimate of 8.9%. In absolute terms, growth in GDP in 2022 was 1.5% higher than the last pandemic year. लास्ट पैंडेमिक ईयर से 2022 का जीडीपी 1.5% ज़्यादा है, showing that the economy has recovered most of the losses suffered during COVID. In its first advance estimate raised in January, the government had projected the economy to grow at 9.2% in 2021 to 22. 2021 से 22 तक इंडिया का इकोनॉमी 9.2% बढ़ सकता है, गवर्नमेंट ने ऐसा प्रोजेक्शन किया है। लेट्स सी द चार्ट। 2019 से 20 तक जीडीपी 4% बढ़ा था। 2020 से 21 तक कोविड के टाइम -7.3% पे आ गया था। 2021 से 22 9.2%। 2022 से 23 तक प्रोजेक्टेड किया गया है 8 to 8.5%। Further, the government statistics department had projected nominal GDP growth for 2021 to 22 is 19.5%. Nominal GDP is the GDP based on current prices, while real GDP factor in inflation or surge in prices. Graph shows largest economies in the world by PPP GDP in 2022 according to International Monetary Fund. China will be the first 30.18%, US will be the second 25.35%, India is third 11.75%, then Japan, Germany, Russia, Indonesia, UK, Brazil are 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and France is 10. What is fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit is the gap between the government receipts and spending where the latter is more than the former. The fiscal deficit for 2021 to 22 settled at rupees 50.87 lakh crore or 6.7% of GDP compared to the revised target of rupees 15.9 lakh crore or 6.9% of the GDP. The 8.7% GDP growth is primarily on the account of low base. In the fourth quarter of 2021 to 22, the Indian economy grew 4.1% compared to 5.4% in the third quarter of 2021 to 22 and turned to 5% in the 2020 to 21. 2050, government changed the base year used to calculate GDP growth to 2011 to 12. GDP on market prices rather than factor cost, which would take into account the gross value addition of goods and services. Let's see the graph of fiscal deficit. As part of GDP, the fiscal deficit of 2018 to 19 was 3.4%, 2019 to 20 was 4.6%, 2020 to 21 COVID period 9.2%, and 2021 to 22 budget estimates 6.8%. Let's see the graph of Forex reserve. Forex reserve is simply the foreign currencies that another country hold in US per dollar billion a year. India holded the reserve 2018 to 2019 $411 billion, 2019 to 20 $477.8 billion, 2020 to 21 $577 billion, 2021 to 22 $633.6 billion per year. Let's see the inflation rate from 1986 to 2026. The inflation rate in 2022 is 4.09%. State of economy. Indian economy estimated to grow by 9.2% in real terms in 2021 to 22. Factor that support growth in 2022 and 23. 2022 से 23 तक जो चीज़ें इंडिया की इकोनॉमी ग्रो कर सकती है. Widespread vaccine coverage, gains from supply side reforms, easing of regulation, robust export growth, ramped up capital spending. India's economic growth. GDP is forecast to remain steady this fiscal year, despite a warning base effect, rising prices, especially for imported commodities, and twin deficit pose risks to the outlook. GDP project to expand 7.5% in fiscal year 2022. Previous month forecast and 6.4% in fiscal year 2023. Let's see the India's gross domestic product in current prices from 1987 to 2027. In 2023, it was projected to $4,681. India's economy recovers from past pre-pandemic लेवल. इंडिया का इकोनॉमी कोविड पैंडेमिक से रिकवरी कर चुका है. इंडिया प्रोजेक्टेड एज फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी इन द वर्ल्ड. प्रोजेक्शन किया गया है इंडिया की इकोनॉमी दुनिया का तेज़ सबसे ज़्यादा बढ़ने वाली इकोनॉमी बन सकती है. GDP प्रोजेक्टेड टू ग्रो बाय 8 to 8.5% इन 2022 एंड 23. वर्ल्ड बैंक का प्रोजेक्शन है इंडिया का GDP 8.7% बढ़ सकता है 2022-23 तक. एशियन डेवलपमेंट बैंक का प्रोजेक्शन है इंडिया GDP 7.5% बढ़ सकता है. वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमिक आउटलुक प्रोजेक्शन ऑफ इंडिया GDP इज 9%. Let's see the graph of real gross domestic product growth rate from 2070 to 2027. 2017 का ग्रोथ रेट था 6.8%, 2018 का 6.45%, 2019 का 3.74%, 2020 में -6.6%, 2021 में 8.9% GDP रेट, 2022 में GDP रेट है 8.15%. सो ये वीडियो यही तक था. आई होप ये वीडियो आपको इन्फॉर्मेटिव लगा. और इफ़ यू लाइक दिस वीडियो प्लीज़ लाइक, कमेंट, शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब एंड सपोर्ट अस. और व्हाट डू यू थिंक अबाउट दिस टॉपिक? यू कैन कमेंट मी इन द कमेंट सेक्शन. So take care guys, see you all in next video. Goodbye, thank you.